Yo, 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 yo. What is going on, CoD Familia? It is your boy BN, aka Mr. Kingdom Builder. And today, we are going to be talking about NOIR. We're going to talk about a number of things here. Number one, we're going to talk about some of these realistic / unrealistic expectations that the number one alliance has on them in any Kingdom Builder. We're going to talk about some situations with NOIR. We're going to look at some past KvKs. We're going to look at some recent or some current data along with some mix. We're going to talk about how Zone 3 is looking like it's going to end up playing out because that opens in about 3.5 plus days. And then we're going to show you a bunch of screenshots and from conversations from the official Discord from people talking about NOIR. And then I'm going to wrap things up with giving you my thoughts maybe throughout, but hopefully at the end in conclusion of what do I think really plagues and do we have these realistic versus unrealistic expectations set on the number one alliance? And can that be good? Can it be bad? And how does that really impact the number one alliance in any game? In this case, i.e. NOIR. So as always, if you enjoy the content, make sure you throw us up because it helps out a lot. So number one, let me start off with laying some foundation, which is this idea that NOIR over the past couple seasons, with the exception, and we're going to kind of not cue the music, but we're going to cue over to a sheet now, where this is my sheet where I basically keep, and I haven't done it for SOS2, and I haven't done it for the second group in SOS1, I believe. But part of that is just because I wish I had more time, essentially. However, I digress. With NOIR's matchup now, it is being touted, if you will, that it is pretty much almost, and again, this is like a general consensus from the community, is that the season's pretty much over, right? It was over the moment that Echo decided to go solo, or sorry, I should say it was like confirmed, like hard set after. But I think most people believed that the leaning of advantages were already in favor of the NOIR group. And in this case, that being what we'll show you here, right, which is NOIR, RK, Kong, GG, right? So 3, 5, 48, and 68. Now, if 60 decided to ally with 49, 62, and 70, the NOIR group still would have had some numbers advantages, right? We showed that off to you in previous videos. Also keep in mind, and again, always good to mention disclaimers when I can remember, but that this data is based on PvP power or fighting power at the punching weight of 60 million plus players. That's what that's factored into, right? So we didn't look at like total kingdom power. We just looked at what the PvP power was. This was done post Brink of War, I think a day or two after. So before Zone 2 was opened. But we're not really going to be focusing too much on that today. And so you get into this situation where you look at the current season and you say, well, based on how the matchups are looking, which again, at one point, if this was going to be the matchup, and again, this is PvP power, this is 60 mil plus power, this is not total kingdom power, and again, after post Brink of War, a day or two after. But this is what the matchup could have looked like if it was going to be kind of like a 3 Zone 1 versus the other 3 Zone 1. And however, this is what it has turned into, which is, or what it ended up being, we should say, where Echo decided to go solo, and then you have NTS, FG, BXS working together, right? So 49, 62, 70, 60 solo, and then 68, 5, 3, and 48 are together. At this point, once Echo decided to go solo, that I would argue hard confirmed, like just without a shadow of a doubt, that the season, in my opinion, and I believe in other people's opinions, was pretty much over. And it sucks that that happened. Now, a number of people initially felt that after the matchups came out, the season already had, as we alluded to a bit ago, a numbers advantage in favor of the NOIR, GG, RK, Kong group, right? Or for 68, 5, 3, and 48. Not to say that it was at a hopeless title or description, but that there just was a clear advantage at that point. I don't want to say overwhelming, but a clear advantage. And so we get to this point where let's look at some of the previous situations on why I think, and I want to say this as sincerely as I can because, and you're going to hear me mention this, I want to see NOIR fight their heart out just as much as I would love to see everyone fight their heart out and have the most enjoyable PvP experience that they can get in a KvK, because that's what the game is really about once you get to endgame, right? You could argue mid-endgame, but once we get to endgame and you're in a KvK, the idea is how can we get the most amount of people to engage in a KvK, the most amount of people to participate in fighting, and the most amount of people to get some kind of fulfillment and enjoyment out of the fighting they're doing, and then how can we have the longest and most amount of PvP, right? Now, if you have a 55-day season now, then we're not saying you need to be fighting for 54 out of 55 days, but you also can't say that we're going to be satisfied with 3 to 4 days or 3 to 5 days of fighting throughout an entire season, right? Now, maybe you can give a conservative estimate and say, okay, maybe a third of the time, maybe somewhere between like a third and a half of the time, maybe you'd like to see fighting. Maybe you say a third, and then that third is like plus or minus, right? Just to kind of keep things a little conservative. But even if that's the case, you're still talking, 17, 18 days of fighting out of a 55-day season? I don't think that's unrealistic at all. I think that's what we should be striving to, in my opinion. And so we get to the situation where let's look at some of the history here. So previously, in SOS 1, we had NOIR, right? So the matchup here was NOIR and TFS and AFS going up against BXS, SXB, and EIS and EIL. I don't really care too much for people calling it a NAP. I mean, they allied, right? You can dress it up however you want. The fact is, if you want to call it a temporary allyship, I would have been fine with that. But the fact is that you're ally and you're working together, right? And so, and I say this because a NAP to me means that you're not working together in any capacity and you're not fighting each other. Now, some people can have their own interpretations of that, but I just think it's easier just to say, hey, we're allying together at this point. And that much is obviously evident when you end up seeing them fighting against the other group in Zone 3. It would have been different if TFS acted independently and NOIR acted independently because of the NAP, right? But it almost seems like just a convenient level of political wordplay to say that, oh, well, because TFS is here and you have to fight BXS, and then EIS is over here and NOIR is over here, or sorry, I have to do it like how it might look, right? So EIS is here, TFS is here, and then below them is BXS, right? And then NOIR is like over here. So TFS was obviously going to get sandwiched and NOIR had to go and fight someone. It's just, again, it just, I don't want to say it's BS, but it just comes off as like, come on, let's just call it what it is. I digress. Once again, they get this matchup. Clearly, the numbers were more in favor of the TFS NOIR. Now, a lot of us would have liked to seen NOIR BXS and TFS EIS because the numbers, when we did the comparison, when we looked at total power and PvP power, again, they looked closer in that regard. Now, that obviously doesn't account for everything, but I think most people are of the general consensus approach that would have been a more fair matchup, or at least one that we would have liked to see because on paper it looked fair, right, to set some appropriate context. Then we get to SB2. So SB2 before SOS 1, NOIR was with GG. They went up against NATK. Obviously, once again, still the matchup was more in favor. Now, the total matchup was NATK, FSK, and then we had GG NOIR, UDF, Gray, K, and Q. Clearly, there was a little bit more of an advantage on this one for GG. Or sorry, for the NOIR group. Right? So again, they're not really being tested. They weren't really tested that much, even in SOS. Now, they were tested more in SOS 1, I would argue, than probably they were tested in SB2. But it still really wasn't something where you're really looking at it and you're saying to yourself, oh man, this could go any way. Right? Like, I don't think, and that's what I want to see out of it. That's what I would hope people would want to enjoy when you're watching a match is that the matchup is as close as possible to a point where you don't know who's going to win, and you're excited for whoever may come out on top, or you just get people who cheer for their sides, and it's not just something where it just kind of feels like it's cut and dry and you know what's going to happen no matter what. And then we get to T1. Now, T1 was before SB2, of course, but this was, I think, a little bit of a letdown. And some of you may remember this because this was the season where Crazy Bob was with VVV. We did that interview because after Zone 2, I think it was Zone 2, that opened, and they were supposed to fight with NOIR, and it was supposed to be like this big hyped up thing, and people were really excited. I think I was streaming it at one point, and there was a lot of hype going into it. And I believe they fought for less than a day. It might have been for less than 12 hours where it was peak heavy fighting activity. And I'm sure someone will let us know, in case we're totally off base. But I believe it was somewhere between 12 and 24 hours, but less than a day from what I recall. And at this point, Bob opted to basically, AKA deuce, right? Deuce is out, basically quit. And we did this, right? And we covered this. Bob was kind enough to answer some questions for me. We did the interview. I did that interview with Bob to talk about the situation and kind of what he thought about it. Which is, again, you could search on my channel for that one. I thought it was a fantastic interview with Bob. He gave a lot of really good insights from his perspective and how things felt to him, not only about the game but his playing experience. And so, but I think for NOIR, it had to be a letdown because even people that were in VVV at the time felt that, I don't want to say they felt, again, I don't know how they felt as far as general. I don't want to say they felt let down by Bob because I don't know, but I'm sure. What I do know is that there was this wind that had left the sails for some people that was being reported from VVV, and they just didn't end up really fighting anymore because they felt like, man, we lost our big boy, our morale leader, our captain, our frontline fighter, and that can have massive psychological implications for people when it comes to boosting your morale or to demoralizing. And I think in this case, it was reported from some people there that it was kind of demotivating, it was demoralizing, which is not to Bob's fault, but it is the after effects and the results of what happened. And so at that time, you didn't really see VVV fighting NOIR anymore as far as hard as they were for the little bit of time in the beginning. But from NOIR's side, again, this had to feel like a letdown. It had to feel like, man, we were really looking forward to this and we didn't get it. And especially at this point where NOIR had already established themselves as the new number one, right, passing TFS and others, you would imagine that when your sole purpose as a top alliance, in most cases, quote unquote, is to recruit and to filter and to fine pick, being selective in who you choose, where you're predominantly, if not all the time, bringing in fighters, you would hope that your expectations are to fight in a KvK and to do so as long as possible and to make sure the fighting is enjoyable for your members. Now, do you think that we're going to allow for our members to enjoy fighting if we're not taking challenging matchups? And that isn't just solely directed at NOIR. That's a general point in anything, is that, and I'm not saying directed at them in a negative way. I'm saying directed at them when it comes to you hopefully looking out for the best interest of all the members that you are in charge and in care of. If the people joining you have an expectation and have a mindset that you are fighting, and you are not living up to that by giving the members the best fighting experience that you possibly can, what are you doing? I think that's a fair question to ask of any alliance in any kingdom. Right? Why would anyone take a heavily favored or unfavored, disfavored matchup in any regard? Why would you not look to have the most fair, most balanced matchup across the board? And this is not a difficult thing to do, right? You basically just need to have you could have one data person. Like I could do it, where you're just looking at, you basically pull the data before you get into diplomacy and you present that to everyone. You say, look, here's total power. Here's the breakdown for 40, 50 mil plus on what it looks like every 20 mil. until maybe you get to like 100. Then you can do 125, 150, 175, 200 plus, right? You look at merit gains, you look at total kills, you look at heals if you want to get ratios, and then you basically compare all that, right? You get like some values, or values if you have plus or minus errors in them, and then you look at how this kingdom and this alliance stacks up, these alliances and these kingdoms stack up, and then you're just plugging, right? That's all. You're just plugging. And obviously, you probably would do this after like a post-Brink of War, and I'll maybe do a deep dive video on this later on like exactly what you're going to look at on how you would kind of do these things. But my point overall is that the last time that NOIR, in my eyes, and I think in a number of other people's eyes, really felt that they had an amazing PvP experience, and it's the one that you'll always hear me refer to, and it was the ones where Jason and TFS were involved, right? Before this one, all right, this was the last one. This is where it was TFS, FS, I think TDR, and then it was NOIR, Dusk, and Dawn, right? And you see that here in Zone 3. And when I tell you, this was probably my second favorite KvK matchup. So if, like, when we're talking top KvK, like a number 1 or number 2 KvK group for that season, this is probably my second favorite matchup. The first one was when Jason and Mephisto went up against each other first, back when it was Jedi, DX, etc., and others were involved back then. And that probably would have been my second favorite, because that was just complete mayhem with 2 major scale battles happening, or wars happening on that map. And I have to believe that NOIR felt like they had to have felt like this was such a fulfilling PvP in KvK. I don't even know if I even heard anyone say that, oh no, it was awful and they hated it out of that. And this all leads me to, well, where we are now. And that, I think, is a situation where when you are the number 1 alliance in any kingdom builder, it can very much feel at times, I would imagine, that you're kind of doomed if you do, doomed if you don't. It's almost kind of like choosing the less of 2 evils. And however, I think from public-facing views from the community is that, and maybe this can kind of suck to hear, but it's almost as though you either, and this is just how I generally feel about KvKs, most people know this because I talk about it all the time, but I almost feel like in the worst situation, I would always opt to take the fairest matchup possible where my group is not the strongest. And I don't necessarily mean that they need to take a hugely disfavored matchup. What I mean is that, like, let's say the matchup is 48 billion to 52 billion. And I'm speaking in very generality, very layman terms and rawness here, if you will, right? So we're not like doing a super deep dive. But the point is if they're 48 million and they're going up against 52 million, but the T5 and the 100 mil plus is pretty close, I would rather see them on the 48 mil side than I would on the 52 mil side. And however, if they're on the other side, I don't see that as necessarily bad either, but it's just, to me, and I think when you think about this, and I'd love to hear what people think, right? If you are of that kind of similar mindset where if the numbers are close, would you rather have NOIR as the number 1 alliance on the side that has just a little bit less power, or a little bit less total T5, or a little bit less 100 mil plus players just because they're the number 1 alliance? Or does it not matter as long as we're getting the most balanced and fair matchup? Now, I am okay with either side. I just lean a little bit more on that side where I want to see that happen. Right? And I don't know if I want to say I want to see that happen, but I would almost argue that I'd like to see that happen just to see if they will be challenged and pushed as much as they have been when they have fought against TFS and allies in the past. Now, just to show, as we get into just some numbers here, right, again, I told you guys I'm not really going to talk about this stuff too much, but this I thought was interesting. I just went through and pulled this just before recording this video, where we looked at the number 200 powered player. Now, it would be cool if eventually we could go beyond 200. I think in Rock you can go up to 1,000, so that would be cool if eventually we get there. But for here, this is for each kingdom. So Kingdom 3, the number 200 player was at 47.97 million power. NOIR, at number 1, they had 86.42 million power for their number 200 player and above. Kingdom 48, 44.59 million power. Kingdom 68, 64.99% pretty much 65 mil at that point. NTS was at 30.8 million. FG 46.87 million. BXS for Kingdom 70, 71.08 million. And then Kingdom 60 with Echo was at 80.07. So, again, just shows like Echo was second. You could say BXS and their group third. And then 68 probably would have been fourth. And then 48 fifth. 6 probably would have went to 62. And then kind of rounding that out with 49. However, however you feel now, actually, one thing I did think about here that I thought might have been interesting, you guys have to let me know if you would have liked to seen this, is if we looked at who the top kingdom was with the highest number 200, and then if I went into each of the other kingdoms and I found out what position on their top 200 would have matched with the number 200. So an example would have been if I went into Kingdom 3, let's say their number 105, right? 105, their number 105 player would have been at around 60.4 million, right? I could have added something in here that said Kingdom 3 matches 5 with their 105th player compared to Kingdom 5's 200 player, and then kind of done that to the others. I thought that was like an interesting way to maybe do something there. Curious if you guys would have liked to maybe seen that one. However, then we get into just kind of showing you the second group, right? This is one we did with our big data stat pool for them, where you can just see the kingdoms. Now, keep in mind, again, these were taken post-Brink of War, just to be clear, right? So it was a day or two afterwards. And you can see they're the second, where the strongest group ended up being, S25. That's with the EIS, ANCS, NF57, BDO, NASB, Gen, ROE, VP22, and Bossy. Okay, now I want to get into some screenshots here. So, again, we already talked about this. Level 3 pass is going to open up soon. We're going to talk about the map in a sec. I want to get to some screenshots that I ended up pulling here from, and I'm going to put my screen up here, from the CoD Discord. And I just wanted to read some of these because I thought some of these were interesting as I was looking them up. So someone had said here to mention, yes, why? Now, these are from recent to oldest. Not we GG and NOIR is against us too, and why we must waste RSS on you if I can save RSS for good KvKs. Now, again, that's talking about, I imagine, the Zone 2, right, where BXS opted to not fight Echo there, and Echo going solo with, from what they said, the majority of their members wanted to see. And again, that was just something that we saw kind of mentioned in some of the chats. I'm not sure if that's confirmed or not, but some people were saying that they took a member vote and most of the members went in favor of wanting to go solo in hopes of getting more PvP. Then we get the next one here, which is, imagine not wanting to fight in a KvK, just quit. Oh, God, man, the shots are being fired early here. Here we go. So, yes, why GG NOIR against us too, and why we must waste RSS. Also, if you're taking it by that logic, why would you ever fight in this game and waste RSS? Just ally all servers on the map and win your dragons for free. Why waste any RSS? Keep farming till season 25. Jesus, guys, man. This one. MF for asking BXS to fight was the first mistake. Bros in NOIR who allied two camps talking about us not wanting to fight. Lol. I just love the Who is Julia comment. Kind of, man, love for Julia. Man, Burgess's gif here, or face. Yeah, we need to be able to pick zones. Some KvKs are ruined because of it. NOIR, Echo, X NOIR, RIP. I know you love me, Barracuda. So, this is something that I've talked about before, and I'll continue mentioning it because I think it's really important and people need to be able to hear this. I do believe that there are a few ways that we can ultimately improve matchmaking, and I'll do more of a deep dive on this, but I have said this at kind of face value as a general topic or header, which is that one, it would be awesome if kingdoms could pick zones similarly to kind of like where your group, like your number, like the number one kingdom in your group picks, then the other number one kingdom in the other group picks, the number two kingdom in group A picks, number two kingdom in group B. So everyone can kind of pick, right? The other way to do it is where you have, and then you can also do it where like the kingdoms can choose who they want to ally with, so you can have kingdoms that can apply. I think they did this, and I've referred to this before when they did Light and Dark in Rock, where they had like these groups set up with A-seed kingdoms, and then people could apply to the A-seed kingdoms, the kings could apply, and then they would either be accepted or denied by the kind of team captain, right, or the A-seed. The other way to do it is where you have the system or the COD team / dev team just picks the matchups. And not just picks the matchups, but they pick I guess technically yes, but they pick which kingdoms are going to be with who. So they kind of take it all out. They would have to look at the data. They'd have to look at power. They would have to look at maybe average spending, possibly, if they were able to look at that per player. They would want to look at merit gains per season, kills, heals, deads taken. Like, you'd want to look at that as a total and a per season average, because you probably would want to factor that in for most recent. Maybe a couple other things that you could look at as well. But then you would comb through all of that. You'd have to come up with probably an algorithm. I mean, there's other things you could do it the old-fashioned way. But if they are able to come up with something like that, and then they say, okay, we're going to pair these people together, and then we're going to place them on like one side of the map, other groups on the other side of the map, or you come up with a different map, however it may be. Right, that could be one way to do it. Now, another way to do it is where, actually, you know what? I'm going to save this idea because I have a fantastic idea, I believe, and I'm going to save this because I think that this could be phenomenal, and I'm going to mention this in my other video when we actually do a deep dive on KvK matchups. Okay, let's continue. This is one where we see NOIR and GG fighting, and I had to like impose this, so that's why, again, it might seem a little sloppy there. We have, so someone had said, where was this here? No. Oh, here it is. Actually sad that NOIR is doing that against GG. Negative 62k turn. Can't be fun for GG, and they are allies. And then Ball said, yeah, you'll be surprised. You know, my thought on doing like PvP stuff like this, part of it is, keep in mind, if you're doing open field, you're not going to take any deads. And if you're only going to do it where you're just relying on the free healing and you know that you're going to be safe, or you'll be able to be at full heal before the major fight starts, I don't really have a problem with it. However, my view is if you are going to just do this because you want to merit trade or gain merits, maybe just merit trade. If you're going to do this because you want to practice PvP, you want to practice formations, okay. I could actually see something like that being valuable because it's educational. You're going to learn from it. You're going to gain some experience. Back to being alive. Next one is, do you have... Oh, hang on. We'll do that one. Oh, hang on. I got to do this. Let me do it in order because this one specifically was the verse. So someone said here, Boo, Tsunami said, Boo, do you have any hot females in the war that could possibly fall in love with me? It's absolutely hilarious. Next one. Hot males in the war. Yes, most of us are. But the type to fall in love, doubtful. Their only love is for the game. It's hilarious. And then someone, Jingo, said, can any content creator cover how hard we're going to farm this KvK and then NOIR versus Echo KvK? I mean, it potentially could happen. Now, this I thought was interesting because there was a few points here that were brought up. I doubt anyone wanted a free-for-all. The general consensus, even from players within NOIR, is that a 1v5 would have been the most fun. That actually would have been interesting. Probably in the future, they will let you pick. I don't think that'll work. War can only have two sides. There is no such thing as free-for-all. I do tend to agree with that sentiment. People have to commit money to spend on RSS. Sucks, but that's war. I feel sorry for young servers that get crushed by strong servers always getting stronger. It seems like every time people have this discussion, NOIR players come in triggered as fatajos and have a tantrum and then leave, even though they start the discussion themselves. The rest of the next says nope, L. And then this one, yeah, blame Power NOIR top. Ken on top, ain't no thing like a chicken wing. Ain't no thing like a chicken wing. Okay, the NOIR free to ally. It's not like they allied the whole server versus Echo. They wanted a 3v3. Facts, and Echo can do what they want too. Legit, it's done. Why are we still talking about? No clue. NOIR decided the dimple for the season. Echo said no thank you. Move on. That's for sure. No one can blame you, though. Don't blame them for allying too. And then we get the last one here, which was... I'm starting apologizing now to NOIR that will have to carry my fat arses from GG. You too noob to be carried. You better do noob. Just, man, some of these guys are absolutely hilarious. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about is just kind of how the matchup looks to one of those comments, which is when we go back to the matchup, the challenge for me is that what happens if, like what I talked about and like what we saw someone else mention, and I'm sure other people have mentioned as well, is what happens if it's just a total steamroll. And I think that is my biggest worry here, is that GG, WP, NOIR, right, regardless of what happens, even if BXS fights and pushes GG out, and WP out of Zone 3, once the level 5 pass is open, NOIR is already here, right? And so they're going to come in, and then I would just argue it's going to be pretty clean for them to take over. I mean, the only way I don't see it happening where it's so overwhelming is if GG and WP are able to win. Either win, where BXS and XXB like completely crush GG and WP to where they also have time to recoup a bit before NOIR enters and fights. That's, I think, the only situation I would see where, okay, this could be, and that's only if Echo doesn't assist BXS and they're just fighting it out. So that's the worst case, is that NOIR and them kind of take that. And then at that point, it's, okay, now they're just probably going to come down here to level 6 pass. And they're probably going to come in there, right, most likely at that point, crush Echo. And then Echo's going to get sandwiched, right? So it'll be that, and then maybe NTS hitting them from the back. It just, like, if you're talking about worst case scenario, it could just be the main group kind of just going around, right? Just going around and just steamrolling everyone at that point. And so, I think that's the worst case. I hope that doesn't happen. I hope we get some decently long-lasting PvP. But like I said, to me, this is a combination of the matchups, starting locations for kingdoms, the map design for pass openings, and then also diplomacy. And I guess, in conclusion, I just hope it doesn't suck, right? I hope that it doesn't end up being the absolute worst case, even if that feels like that's kind of the direction it's going. And I said this before, and I hope it doesn't happen, but to some people it feels like it already is, where this could be the second most disappointing KvK from a top 2 KvK group in history. And, we'll have to wait and see. I'd love to know what you guys think. Let me know your thoughts below. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you have a different viewpoint? Please feel free to share. And remember, keep in mind, we will be releasing another video where we talk about how the situation got to where it is, from hearing about how diplomacy transpired and underwent prior to the KvK starting, as I have already been getting feedback and responses from a number of leaders from kingdoms that are in this KvK. And I reached out to everyone equally, and I'm going to read what I was provided, whether that's from someone wanting to remain anonymous or is okay with saying, hey, this came from our group. We'll be excited to do that as well. That's going to do it for me. As always, until next time, we'll catch you later.